Dr. Fauci, did you delete any emails or records related to the Wuhan lab or the origins of the virus?
No, I did not.
Okay. Dr. Morins said in a May 2021 email, he indicated that he was connecting people to you in a, quote, secret back channel. Do you know what he was referring to?
I don't have any idea what he's talking about. There is no back channel at NIAID.
He also said in another email that there is no worry about Freedom of Information Act. I can send stuff to Tony on his private email. Did you communicate with anyone relating to anything regarding NIH or with Dr. Morins on a private email?
I do not do government business on my private email.
Okay. Have you communicated with Dr. Morins via private email, even if it was not necessarily your definition of government business?
It might have been because, as I mentioned in my opening statement, one of his functions is to write chapters, medical scientific chapters with me. So it is conceivable that I communicated with him on my private email when we were writing a chapter, and that was not official.
What about Peter Daszak?
No.
Okay. Today you testified that you did not suppress the lab leak theory, yet in the past you have said, quote, it is a distortion of reality, unquote. You've said, quote, I've heard these conspiracy theories, and like all conspiracy theories, they're just conspiracy theories. That's what you told the American people. And so would you like to clarify what science were you following then?
Yeah, no, I've also been very, very clear and said multiple times that I don't think the concept of there being a lab leak is inherently a conspiracy theory. What is conspiracy is the kind of distortions of that particular subject, like it was a lab leak and I was parachuted into the CIA like Jason Bourne and told the CIA that they should really not be talking about a lab leak.
Thank you.
That's a conspiracy.
Appreciate that. Dr. Fauci, how much have you earned from royalties from pharmaceutical companies since the pandemic began in 2021?
Zero.
It says NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers. You're saying that you did not receive any of the $710 million.
On COVID, I received, I think, $122 for a monoclonal antibody that I made 27 years ago.
Okay, so just in general, though, how much have you received, not related to COVID, just in general, how much have you received in royalties between 2021 and 2023?
I think none.
Okay, so somebody received the 710.
Somebody did, but not me.
You didn't receive any royalties. Okay.
I see no royalties associated with COVID. I mentioned.
Yeah, I said.
No, I just said. I'm on the record, and I want to make sure that this is clear that I've developed a monoclonal antibody about 25 years ago that's used as a diagnostic that has nothing to do with COVID, and I receive an average of about $120 a year from that.
Okay. But the bottom line here is that scientists at NIH did receive $710 million in royalties. And I guess my question is, don't you think that if these experiments are made using American tax dollars, that any of those royalties, this nearly billions of dollars, should be going back to the American taxpayer, not in the pockets of the scientists? Do you believe that's a law that we should consider changing?
If you want to change the patent laws and the Bayh-Dole Act, then go ahead. Okay. That's not for me to say.
I'm asking your opinion.
Doctor, why was it so important that the virus not have started in a lab?
We don't know where it started, and that's the reason why I keep an open mind. So I don't know what you mean by why was it so important. It wasn't important.
You still don't know where it started? The guys you gave money to figured it out in 3 days.
No.
Mr. Anderson said on January 31st, 2020, virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory. The very next day, Dr. Gary said, I don't know how this happens in nature. It'd be easy to do in a lab. And then 3 days later, Shazam, they switch and say it has to be nature. So they figured out in 3 days, but you still don't know?
No, in fact, if you look at what they were saying, Congressman Jordan, they were saying that it was not a manufactured virus. It still could have evolved out of a lab.
Let me read something here to you.
They're not incompatible.
In our study on the censorship of the Biden administration working with big tech, I want to read you a WhatsApp message from Mark Zuckerberg. Can we include that the White House put pressure on us to censor the lab leak theory? So this is a communication on July 16th, 2021. Nick Clegg, Joel Kaplan, Sheryl Sandberg, Mark Zuckerberg. They're certainly feeling the pressure to downplay any lab leak theory and go with the natural origin theory.
Is there a question there?
There's coming. One's coming. Here's another email to Mark Zuckerberg. It says, subject line, COVID misinformation, Wuhan lab leak theory. In response to continued public pressure and tense conversations with the new administration, we started removing 5 COVID claims, including the lab leak theory. Mr. Zuckerberg responds, this seems like a good reminder that when we compromise our standards due to pressure from an administration in either direction, we often later regret it. Why was it so important the virus not have started in a lab?
Wasn't so important that the virus not. We don't know. We know
It was important to someone in the Biden administration, so much so that the top people at Meta, the top people at Facebook are asking, why are we getting all this pressure to downplay the lab leak theory? And we have an email from June of the same year, June 4th, 2021, saying the same thing. It was certainly important to somebody.
Well, what has that got to do with me?
I'm asking you because you're the expert on the coronavirus. I'm saying, why was the administration so pushing not to have the lab leak theory as something that was viable?
I can answer that. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire
Kept an open mind. Dr. Fauci, open mind.
That's correct.
What happened in those 3 days? Why did Dr. Anderson and, Mr. Anderson and Dr. Gary, why did they change their mind in 180 degrees? Because what Christian Anderson says 3 days later, after he said virus looks engineered, virus not consistent with evolutionary theory, 3 days later he says the main crackpot theories going around at the moment relate to this virus being somehow engineered, and that is demonstrably false. How did they figure all that out in 3 days, Dr. Fauci?
You can do that.
Still have an open mind.
Well, what they did is that they testified before this committee. What they did, they went back and looked at the sequences and realized that their initial concern was unfounded about that, and it did not look at all like it was manufactured. But as they said in their paper, even though they feel it was more likely...
3 days. They figured
that's exactly. You could do that in 3 days. You can scan sequences in a day. You don't need 3 days.
Okay, who's Robert Redfield?
The former director of the CDC.
Dr. Redfield, right? And he was also in the coronavirus task force. Is that accurate?
He was a member of the coronavirus task force.
Well, here's what he said to this committee. He said, Redfield said that Fauci and Collins left him out because Redfield suspected that coronavirus had leaked from the Chinese lab. Is that accurate?
Well, he said that, but that's not true. That is incorrect, Congressman.
Dr. Redfield's lying to the committee?
No.
When he sat right where you sat?
When he said that I kept him out, that is an incorrect statement. The roster was on the...
Dr. Redfield in that conference call on February 1st when you had Mr. Anderson and Dr. Gary on that call?
He was not. And the conference call was put together by Jeremy Farrar. So no one kept him out. He said he was kept out because...
Did U.S. tax dollars...
You want me to answer the question?
Yeah, I would just wonder why he wasn't on the call. It seems to me the head of CDC, part of the coronavirus task force, which was formed 2 days prior to that call, would have been on the call.
Well, the call was arranged by Jeremy Farrar. You should ask him.
Okay. Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
I'm sorry.
Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
Yes, of course. It was a sub-award to the Wuhan Institute.
Who approved that award?
Excuse me?
And who approved that award? What agency approved that award?
National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease.
Your agency approved that, right?
Yes, it did. Did
that have anything to do with this downplaying of the lab leak theory?
No.
Nothing to do with it.
Nothing.
What do you agree that there was a push to downplay the lab leak theory?
Not on my part.
Really?
Really?
Wow. Well, I think most of the country would find that amazing.
But look at the facts. I've kept an open mind throughout the entire process.
All right, I yield back.